I stopped by to see my son on his first day at his Foles company and found him cleaning the bathrooms. His Foles said, "This idiot isn't good for anything else." My dad just smirked. My son cried from embarrassment. I didn't say a word, I just walked out and made one call. Before we continue, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to hear my story. If you're comfortable, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now let me tell you my story. The receptionist at Whitmore Properties looked uncomfortable when I told her I was there to see Marcus Henderson. Let me call someone, she said, her perfectly manicured hand hovering over the phone. I smiled, trying to put her at ease. It's his first day. I'm his mother. I thought I'd surprise him with lunch. The young woman, blonde, early 20s, wearing a designer suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, looked even more uncomfortable. Just one moment, please. She made a hushed phone call, her back turned to me. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but her body language was tense. I stood in the gleaming marble lobby of Whitmore Properties, looking around at the obvious displays of wealth, crystal chandelier, leather furniture, enormous photographs of luxury buildings on the walls. My son's father-in-law's empire, Richard Whitmore himself, appeared from the elevator bank. Tall, white, silver-haired, wearing what I recognized as a custom suit. The kind of man who'd never worn anything off the rack in his life. "Mrs. Henderson." His voice was smooth, polished, but there was something underneath it. Amusement? Condescension? "What are you doing here?" "I came to take my son to lunch," I said pleasantly. "To celebrate his first day at work." Richard's expression was strange. A smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Well, I suppose you should see what your son does here. Follow me. My name is Gloria Henderson, and before I tell you about what happened after I made that phone call, you need to understand who I am, and who I was. I'm 68 years old, a black woman who grew up in rural Georgia during segregation. My parents were sharecroppers who worked themselves to exhaustion to send me to college. I was the first person in my family to graduate high school, let alone get a degree. I'd worked my way through Georgia State University, studying accounting and law. I'd been smart, driven, and angry at a system that treated people like me as less than human. After graduation, I'd joined the IRS, not as a regular accountant, but as a special agent with the Criminal Investigation Division. For 30 years I'd investigated financial crimes, tax fraud, money laundering, organized crime, corrupt politicians, billionaires who thought they were above the law. I'd learned to follow money trails that others couldn't see. I'd learned to build cases so airtight that juries convicted in hours. I'd learned to spot liars, cheats, and criminals no matter how expensive their suits or how prestigious their addresses. I'd put dozens of wealthy, powerful people in federal prison. I'd retired 10 years ago with full pension, decorated career, and reputation as one of the best financial crimes investigators the IRS had ever employed. But I'd never told my son Marcus the details. He knew I'd worked for the government and did something with taxes, but I'd deliberately kept the specifics vague. I'd wanted him to have a normal childhood, not grow up worrying about his mother investigating dangerous criminals. Marcus was my only child. His father, my husband David, had died when Marcus was 15, heart attack, sudden and devastating. I'd raised Marcus alone after that. Made sure he got a good education, encouraged him to pursue his dreams. He'd gotten his MBA 2 years ago. I'd been so proud watching him walk across that stage. Then he'd met Claire Whitmore at some networking event. They'd dated for 6 months, gotten married quickly. Claire's family was wealthy, real estate empire, old money, the kind of people who summered in the Hamptons and wintered in Aspen. I'd had reservations. Claire was cold, polished and pretty, but there was something calculating in her eyes. And her father Richard had looked at Marcus during the wedding like he was evaluating livestock. But Marcus had been happy and I'd kept my concerns to myself. Now, 2 years later, Richard had finally offered Marcus a position at Whitmore Properties. "Mr. Whitmore is giving me a real chance, Mom," Marcus had said excitedly on the phone last week. "I'm starting Monday. I'm finally going to prove myself to Claire's family." I'd been happy for him, relieved that maybe I'd been wrong about the Whitmores. Now, following Richard through his gleaming office building, I was about to discover exactly how wrong I'd been about everything. We walked past the executive offices. I could see through glass walls, well-dressed professionals in meetings, at computers, on phone calls, the kind of white-collar work Marcus's MBA had prepared him for. I expected Richard to stop at one of these offices, to introduce me to my son's colleagues, to show me Marcus's new desk, his new business cards, his new professional life. Instead, Richard led me to a service elevator tucked in a back corner. "Your son's office is downstairs," he said, and there was definitely amusement in his voice now. We descended to the basement level. The doors opened to reveal a completely different world from upstairs. Concrete floors, fluorescent lights, the smell of cleaning chemicals. This was the maintenance level. Storage rooms, janitorial supplies, mechanical equipment. I felt something cold forming in the pit of my stomach. Richard led me down a dingy hallway. I could hear the sound of running water scrubbing. He opened a door marked men's restroom. And there was my son. Marcus was on his hands and knees on the bathroom floor, wearing a gray janitor's uniform, rubber gloves on his hands, a bucket of soapy water beside him, scrubbing a toilet with a brush. My brilliant son, my son with the MBA, my son who'd graduated with honors, on his knees, cleaning toilets. He looked up at the sound of the door opening. When he saw me, his face crumbled. "Mom, what are you? You shouldn't be here." I couldn't speak. Couldn't move. Couldn't process what I was seeing. Richard's voice broke the silence, dripping with contempt. "Because this idiot isn't good for anything else." I turned to look at him. He was smiling. Actually smiling. "I gave him a chance in the business," Richard continued, his voice casual, conversational, like he was discussing the weather. "Put him in sales first. He couldn't close a single deal. Put him in property management. He screwed up the paperwork, lost us a tenant. Put him in accounting. He made mistakes that cost us money. So now he's where he belongs. Cleaning toilets. It's honestly the only job he's qualified for." Marcus had stood up, his face streaked with tears of shame. "Mom, please. Just go." "Oh, this is precious," a woman's voice said from the doorway. "Claire, my daughter-in-law, wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month cleaning toilets. Perfect makeup, perfect hair, perfect smile, perfect smirk." "Hi, Gloria," she said, her tone bright and cruel. "Surprise visit? Isn't it sweet how Marcus's mommy came to check on him?" I looked at my son, at the tears on his face, at the uniform, at the toilet brush in his hand. I looked at Richard, still smiling that contemptuous smile. I looked at Claire, smirking like this was all a wonderful joke. And I felt something inside me, something that had been dormant for 10 years. "Wake up, Marcus," I said quietly. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I failed, Mom." His voice was broken. "Mr. Whitmore gave me chances and I failed at everything. This is all I'm good for." "That's not true." "It is true." Claire's voice was sharp. "Marcus couldn't handle real work. Daddy tried. He really did. But your son just isn't cut out for business. He has an MBA, I said, keeping my voice level. "From a good school. He's intelligent and capable." Richard laughed. "An MBA from Georgia State. Not exactly Harvard, and clearly the degree didn't teach him anything useful." Claire walked further into the bathroom, her heels clicking on the tile. She looked at Marcus with undisguised disgust. "Honey, you should be grateful. Daddy's paying you $35,000 a year. That's generous for a janitor." $35,000. I couldn't keep the shock from my voice. "You have him cleaning toilets for $35,000 a year? He's lucky to have any job," Claire said coldly. "No one else would hire him. He tried for 2 years before Daddy finally offered him this position." Marcus was staring at the floor now, couldn't even look at me. "Mom, please just go. I chose this. Mr. Whitmore gave me a chance and I failed. This is what I deserve." "Baby." "No, Mrs. Henderson." Richard's voice had steel in it now. "Your son is my employee. This is between us. You should leave." He stepped closer to me, lowering his voice. "And Marcus, if you tell your mother about your job situation, if you complain, you're fired. And if you're unemployed." He glanced at Claire. "Well, my daughter doesn't need to be married to a jobless loser, does she?" The threat was clear. Marcus's job was tied to his marriage. Lose one, lose both. I looked at Marcus again, saw him broken, defeated, accepting this nightmare as his reality. I could have screamed, could have threatened, could have made a scene, but 30 years of investigating criminals had taught me something important. The best response to injustice isn't loud rage. It's quiet, methodical revenge. I looked at Richard Whitmore, memorized his smug face, his expensive suit, his arrogant smile. "I see," I said quietly. I turned to Marcus. "I'll talk to you later, baby." Then I walked out, down the dingy hallway, into the service elevator, through the marble lobby with its crystal chandelier and leather furniture, into the parking garage, into my car, My hands were shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. My son, my brilliant, kind, good son, on his knees scrubbing toilets while his father-in-law called him an idiot, and his wife smirked. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through my contacts to a name I hadn't called in 5 years. James Morrison, Deputy Director, Department of Justice, my former colleague from my IRS days. A man who'd worked cases with me for 20 years. A man I'd saved from a near-fatal mistake on an investigation once, earning his eternal loyalty. My finger hovered over the call button, then I pressed it. James answered on the third ring. Gloria Henderson, I haven't heard from you in years. How's retirement treating you? I need a favor, James. His tone changed immediately. In 30 years of working together, I'd never asked him for favors. What kind of favor? I need to report a crime. Tax fraud, money laundering, possibly racketeering. That's not a favor, Gloria. That's your civic duty. Who's the target? Richard Whitmore, Whitmore Properties, real estate developer, worth about $200 million. James whistled low. That's a big fish. You have evidence? Not yet. But I know his type, James. Too much money, too much arrogance, too much confidence that rules don't apply to him. Men like that always cheat. They can't help themselves. You want me to open an investigation based on your instinct? I want you to open a preliminary investigation. Give me consultant access to financial records. Let me dig. If I'm wrong, we close it quietly. If I'm right, I paused. When I'm right, you'll have a case that'll make your career. Gloria, you're retired. I can't just give you access to an active investigation, then hire me as a consulting specialist. James, I'm calling in every favor you've owed me for 30 years of partnership, every case I helped you close, every time I saved your ass. This is me collecting. Silence on the other end. Then, why do I feel like you're about to destroy someone's life? Because I am, I said flatly. He humiliated my son, made him clean toilets while calling him an idiot. My son has an MBA, James. He's brilliant and capable. And Richard Whitmore has him on his knees scrubbing floors for $35,000 a year. That's horrible. But Gloria, personal motivation could complicate prosecution. The prosecution will be clean because Richard Whitmore is dirty. I guarantee it. Men like him always are. I just need to find where he hid the bodies. Another pause. Okay, I'll open a preliminary investigation. Tax fraud angle. We can justify that. You're brought on as consulting specialist. But Gloria, make sure this is clean. By the book, we can't give his lawyers any opening. Have I ever built a sloppy case? No. Which is why I'm agreeing to this insanity. Go get him. I hung up and started the car. Richard Whitmore had no idea who he'd just humiliated. He thought I was just some retired government worker. Marcus's mother? Someone insignificant. He had no idea that I'd spent 30 years taking down people exactly like him. And now I was coming for his empire. Over the next 2 weeks I became someone I hadn't been in 10 years. I set up my home office like it was an operations center. My old case files, my contacts, my resources from 3 decades of investigations. I pulled out my laptop and logged into the IRS database. My consultant credentials from James gave me access to financial records that most people never see. I started with Richard Whitmore's personal tax returns. 7 years worth, the statute of limitations for most tax fraud. He reported an adjusted gross income of about $5 million per year. High but not outrageous for someone supposedly worth $200 million. But something felt off. I pulled the corporate tax returns for Whitmore Properties and its dozens of subsidiaries. Revenue was reported as roughly $50 million per year, with profits around $15 million. I started digging into the properties themselves. Whitmore Properties owned apartment buildings, shopping centers, office complexes, dozens of properties across 3 states. I pulled property records, matched them against reported rental income, and found my first discrepancy. A luxury apartment building in Buckhead, 200 units. Property records showed occupancy at 95%. The building's website advertised 1-bedroom apartments starting at $3,500 per month. If the building was 95% occupied with average rent of $3,500 per month, that's roughly $65,000 per month in rental income. Nearly $8 million per year just from that one building. But the tax returns for the LLC that owned that building showed rental income of only $4.5 million. Where was the other $3.5 million? I started checking other properties. Found the same pattern. Rental income reported on tax returns was consistently 40–50% lower than what market rate and occupancy should generate. Richard was underreporting income. Massive amounts of income. I dug deeper. The shell companies were cleverly structured. I had to admit, Whitmore Properties was the public face, but underneath it was a labyrinth of LLCs, partnerships and holding companies. Properties were owned by LLCs. Those LLCs were owned by other LLCs. Those were owned by partnerships registered in Delaware, a notorious tax haven. Some of those partnerships had offshore components in the Cayman Islands. It was a classic money laundering structure. Move money through enough corporate entities, especially across state and international lines, and it becomes very difficult to track. But I'd been doing this for 30 years. I knew how to follow money through a maze. I mapped out the corporate structure, created a flowchart showing how money moved from tenants paying rent through various LLCs, eventually ending up where I found offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Accounts in the name of Whitmore Holdings Limited, a Cayman corporation. The balances made my breath catch. $42 million. Richard Whitmore had $42 million sitting in offshore accounts. Money that had never been reported to the IRS. Money that had never been taxed. I kept digging. By the end of the second week, I had a clear picture of Richard Whitmore's criminal empire. The scheme worked like this. Properties collected rent at market rate, say $3,500 per month for an apartment. That money went into an LLC's bank account. The LLC then made management payments to another LLC, consulting fees to a partnership, service charges to an offshore company. Each transfer moved money further from the original source and closer to offshore accounts. Along the way, expenses were inflated. Maintenance costs reported at twice what they actually were. Consulting fees paid to entities that did no actual work. Payments to vendors who didn't exist. All of this reduced the reported taxable income. What should have been $50 million in rental income was reported as $25 million by the time it flowed through all the entities. And a significant chunk, I estimated about $40 million over the past decade, had been moved offshore and never reported at all. I also found something else. Richard was inflating property values for loan applications while deflating them for property tax purposes. He'd tell a bank that an apartment building was worth $50 million to secure a mortgage. Then he'd tell the county tax assessor it was only worth $20 million to reduce property taxes. That was textbook fraud, bank fraud and tax fraud combined. I documented everything: bank records, property valuations, tax returns, corporate filings, offshore transfers. I built a timeline showing exactly how money moved through the system. I created spreadsheets showing the discrepancies between reported income and actual income. I identified every entity, every account, every person involved, and I found something that made my heart ache: Claire's signature on many of the documents. My daughter-in-law wasn't just benefiting from her father's crimes. She was an active participant. She was on the board of Whitmore Properties. She'd signed off on fraudulent property valuations. She'd approved transfers to offshore accounts. Claire knew exactly what her father was doing, and she'd helped him do it. While I was building my case, Marcus was suffering. He called me every few days, his voice getting more defeated each time. "Mom, I'm okay. The job's fine. Baby, you don't have to do this." "Yes, I do. Claire's right. No one else will hire me. I've tried. I'm not good at business like her family is." "That's not true. Then why do I keep failing? Why couldn't I close sales? Why did I mess up the paperwork?" "Mom, maybe Mr. Whitmore's right. Maybe I'm only good for cleaning." It broke my heart. But I couldn't tell him what I was doing. If Richard suspected an investigation, he'd start hiding evidence, destroying documents, moving money. I needed surprise on my side. "Marcus, I love you. You're brilliant and capable, and you deserve so much better than this." "I have, Claire. That's all I need." But I could hear the doubt in his voice. After 3 weeks of investigation, I had everything I needed. I compiled it all into a comprehensive report. 150 pages of documentation, evidence, analysis. I called James. "I've got him. Already, Richard Whitmore has engaged in systematic tax fraud, money laundering and bank fraud over at least the past decade. I estimate he's evaded $15 million in federal taxes. He has $42 million in undeclared offshore accounts. He's falsified property valuations for loan applications. He's created fraudulent entities to hide income." "Gloria, that's massive. It's airtight. Every claim is backed by documents, bank records, tax returns, property files, corporate filings, his own signature on fraudulent loan applications. I've mapped the entire money laundering structure. I'm sending you the file now. Review it. If you agree, we move to grand jury. I sent the file electronically, all 150 pages plus appendices with copies of every document. James called me back 3 hours later. This is the cleanest, most thorough case I've seen in 20 years. How did you find all this? Because men like Richard Whitmore get arrogant. They think they're too smart to get caught. They leave trails everywhere. They can't help themselves. They want to show off how clever they are. We need to move fast. Convene a grand jury. Get indictments. Execute search warrants before he can destroy evidence. Already on it. Grand jury meets next week. If they indict, and they will with this evidence, we raid everything. His office, his home, his properties. Seize computers, files, records. Make sure he can't hide anything. Good? James? There's one more thing. What? Claire Whitmore Henderson, Richard's daughter. She's complicit. Her signature's on fraudulent documents. She's on the board. She approved offshore transfers. She knew she participated. You want her charged too? I want everyone involved to face consequences. Claire treated my son like garbage while benefiting from her father's crimes. She doesn't get a pass. Understood. We'll include her in the investigation. The raid happened on a Tuesday morning, 6 weeks after I'd seen Marcus cleaning that bathroom. I wasn't there. Conflict of interest since Marcus was married to one of the targets, but James called me with updates. At 6 a.m., FBI and IRS criminal investigations hit 5 locations simultaneously. Whitmore Properties headquarters, Richard's mansion in Buckhead, Claire's townhouse, 2 other properties where records were stored, 20 agents per location, search warrants for financial records, computers, files, communications. James told me Richard had been at his office early, probably because wealthy criminals often work long hours, convinced their success makes them untouchable. You should have seen his face when 30 agents walked in, James said. He went from smug to terrified in about 3 seconds. What did he say? This is outrageous. I'll call my lawyer. You can't do this. The usual rich person response to consequences. And Claire, at her townhouse, tried to claim she didn't know anything about her father's business, but we found her laptop with emails discussing offshore transfers, property valuations, tax strategies. She knew everything. The agents seized everything. Computers, file cabinets, phones, documents, boxes and boxes of evidence. Marcus called me 2 hours after the raid started.
Mom?
FBI is at Mr. Whitmore's office. They're taking everything. Computers, files, everything. What's happening? Where are you? Still at the building. I was cleaning the executive floor when they arrived. Mom, they arrested Mr. Whitmore, put him in handcuffs. I've never seen him look scared before. Come to my house, baby. We need to talk. Marcus arrived at my house an hour later, looking confused and frightened. Mom, what's going on? Claire's been calling me. She's hysterical. Says FBI raided her townhouse too. Says they're investigating tax fraud and money laundering. This has to be a mistake. Marcus, sit down. He sat on my couch, the same couch he'd sat on as a child doing homework, as a teenager talking about his dreams, as a young man introducing me to Claire for the first time. I need to tell you something, I said, about who I am, about what I did for 30 years before I retired. You worked for the IRS, I know that. I didn't just work for the IRS. I was a special agent with the Criminal Investigation Division. He looked confused. What does that mean? It means I was federal law enforcement. I investigated financial crimes, tax fraud, money laundering, organized crime. For 30 years I built cases against criminals who used money to hurt people. I put dozens of them in federal prison. Marcus stared at me. You were like an FBI agent, but for taxes, exactly like that. I carried a badge and a gun. I executed search warrants. I testified in federal trials. I was one of the best financial crimes investigators the IRS had. Why didn't you ever tell me? Because I wanted you to have a normal childhood. I didn't want you worrying about your mother investigating dangerous people. But Mom, what does this have to do with? His eyes widened. Did you investigate Mr. Whitmore? Yes. Why? When? After I saw you cleaning that bathroom. After I heard Richard call you an idiot. After I saw Claire smirk while you cried from humiliation. I pulled out my file, showed him the evidence, the offshore accounts, the shell companies, the falsified documents, the tax returns showing massive fraud. Your father-in-law is a criminal, Marcus. He's been running a criminal enterprise for years. Stealing from the government, from banks, from everyone. He's evaded at least $15 million in taxes. He has $42 million in undeclared offshore accounts. He's committed bank fraud by lying about property values. He's laundered money through dozens of shell companies. Marcus looked at the documents, his face going pale. He's really a criminal. Yes. And Marcus, Claire knew. Her signature is on these documents. She approved offshore transfers. She's on the board of directors. She was complicit in everything. My wife is... Claire knew her father was committing crimes. She participated in them. She's not innocent. She's a co-conspirator. Marcus put his head in his hands. My whole marriage is based on a lie. I'm sorry, baby. I know this hurts. He looked up at me, tears in his eyes. You did this? You investigated them because of what they did to me? They humiliated you, made you think you were worthless, had you cleaning toilets for $35,000 a year while they lived in mansions built on stolen money. Mom, what's going to happen to them? If they're convicted, and they will be, the evidence is overwhelming. Richard is looking at 20+ years in federal prison. Claire probably 5 to 10 as an accomplice. And me? What happens to me? That's up to you. But Marcus, you need to understand something. You were never worthless. You were never an idiot. You were just surrounded by criminals who needed you to believe you were less than them so they could control you. The grand jury returned indictments. 2 weeks later, Richard Whitmore, 47 counts of tax evasion, money laundering, bank fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy. Claire Whitmore Henderson, 12 counts of conspiracy, falsifying documents, and tax fraud as an accomplice. Both were arrested. Richard's bail was set at $10 million, which he couldn't make because all his accounts had been frozen as part of asset forfeiture. Claire's bail was $2 million. She couldn't make it either. They both sat in federal detention awaiting trial. Richard's lawyer tried to negotiate, called the prosecutor handling the case, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen who worked under James. My client is willing to cooperate, provide information about other individuals involved in exchange for reduced charges. Patricia's response was ice cold. Your client is the other individual. He's the architect of this entire scheme. We don't need his cooperation. We have documentary evidence of everything. No deals. Claire's lawyer tried a different approach. My client was manipulated by her father. She was following orders. She didn't understand what she was doing. Patricia laughed at that. Your client has a business degree from Emory. She was on the board of directors. She signed documents approving offshore transfers. She knew exactly what she was doing. She's not a victim. She's a co-conspirator. All of Richard's assets were frozen pending trial. The properties, the accounts, the cars, the artwork, everything. His $8 million mansion, Claire's townhouse, vacation homes in Aspen and the Hamptons, all seized under asset forfeiture laws. The Whitmore empire was crumbling. Marcus filed for divorce 3 weeks after the arrests. Claire called him from detention crying, begging, please, you have to help me. Tell them I didn't know. Tell them it was all Daddy. I was just following orders. Were you? Marcus asked quietly. I had to do what Daddy said. He's my father. You signed documents approving fraud. You knew about the offshore accounts. You participated, Claire, but I did it because Daddy told me to. Marcus, please. You have to testify for me. No. What? I'm divorcing you. I've already filed the papers. You can't. Marcus, I'm your wife. You're my wife who let your father humiliate me. Who smirked while I cleaned toilets. Who told me I was worthless and should be grateful for $35,000 a year. I didn't mean those things. I was just... Marcus, I love you. No, you don't. You married me thinking I'd be a useful connection for your father's business. When I wasn't, you treated me like garbage. I deserve better than that. He hung up. Claire called back 7 times. He didn't answer. The trial began 4 months after the raid. It was held in federal court, presided over by Judge Martha Williams, a black woman in her 60s with a reputation for being tough but fair on white-collar crime. The prosecution team was led by Patricia Chen, with support from James and 2 other attorneys from the DOJ. Richard's defense team consisted of 4 lawyers from Atlanta's most expensive white-collar defense firm. Claire's defense was a single lawyer who specialized in diminished capacity defenses, trying to argue that defendants weren't responsible for their actions. I attended every day of the trial, sat in the back of the courtroom, watching the case I'd built presented to a jury. Marcus sat beside me some days. Other days he stayed home, unable to face seeing Claire. The prosecution's case was devastating. Patricia started with the offshore accounts. Showed wire transfers moving millions from U.S. banks to Cayman accounts. Showed that these transfers were never reported to the IRS as required by law. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the defendant Richard Whitmore moved $42 million to offshore accounts over a 10-year period. He never reported this money to the IRS. He never paid taxes on it. That's tax evasion. It's that simple. She showed the property valuations. Documents where Richard told a bank a building was worth $50 million to get a loan, then told the tax assessor it was worth $20 million to reduce property taxes. He lied to the bank to get more money. He lied to the government to pay less taxes. That's fraud. Two kinds of fraud. She showed the shell companies, the maze of LLCs and partnerships designed to hide money and confuse investigators. This isn't aggressive tax planning. This is money laundering, creating fake entities to hide income and evade taxes. Richard's defense tried to argue it was all legal tax strategy. Creative accounting. Exploiting legal loopholes. Patricia destroyed that argument. Legal tax strategies are disclosed to the IRS. You can take deductions. You can use depreciation. You can structure entities to minimize taxes. If you disclose everything and follow the rules. Richard Whitmore didn't follow the rules. He lied about income. He hid money offshore. He falsified documents. That's not tax strategy, that's crime. The jury looked convinced. Witnesses testified over 3 weeks. Bank employees who'd processed the offshore transfers, property managers who confirmed actual rental income was much higher than reported. Accountants who'd worked for Whitmore Properties and been uncomfortable with the creative bookkeeping. One accountant testified, "I told Mr. Whitmore the offshore transfers had to be reported. He told me that's what he paid me to forget. When I insisted, he fired me." Another witness was particularly damning. A former business partner who'd been pushed out of a deal with Richard. Richard bragged about his offshore accounts. Said the IRS was too stupid to find them. Said rich people don't have to follow the same rules as everyone else. That quote made the jury visibly angry. Several jurors shook their heads. Claire's defense tried to paint her as a victim of her father's manipulation. She was raised in this environment. She didn't know it was illegal. She trusted her father when he said everything was legal. But the prosecution showed emails where Claire had questioned some transfers, showing she knew they were problematic. Showed meetings where she'd voted to approve offshore transactions. Showed her signature on documents she'd clearly read and understood. Claire Whitmore Henderson has a business degree from Emory University, Patricia said. She's not stupid. She's not naive. She knew exactly what she was doing. She profited from these crimes for years. She doesn't get to claim ignorance now. Marcus testified briefly as part of the divorce proceedings, which were public record and relevant to Claire's character. Richard Whitmore hired me as a janitor despite my MBA. Paid me $35,000 a year to clean bathrooms. When I asked why I couldn't work in the business side, he told me I wasn't smart enough. That I was an idiot who wasn't good for anything else. And, your wife? Claire Whitmore Henderson, what did she say about this? Marcus's voice was quiet but steady. She told me I should be grateful, that her father was being generous, giving me any job, that I was embarrassing her by being a janitor, but I wasn't capable of anything better. Several jurors looked at Claire with disgust. The media coverage was extensive. Every major outlet ran stories. Real estate mogul's $200 million empire built on fraud. Billionaire made son-in-law clean toilets, while evading millions in taxes. Daughter complicit in father's tax fraud scheme. The story had everything the media loved. Wealth, crime, cruelty, family drama, and buried in several articles. Investigation led by retired IRS Special Agent Gloria Henderson, whose son was the janitor. The jury deliberated for 2 days. On the morning of the third day, they returned with verdicts. Richard Whitmore, guilty on 45 of 47 counts. Not guilty on 2 minor charges, but guilty on all the major ones. Claire Whitmore Henderson, guilty on 10 of 12 counts. Richard showed no emotion, just sat there staring straight ahead, his expensive lawyers unable to save him. Claire cried. Loud, theatrical sobs. Her lawyer patted her shoulder while she wailed. Marcus, sitting beside me, said quietly, "She's not sorry she did it. She's sorry she got caught." "I know, baby." Sentencing was scheduled for 6 weeks later. The sentencing hearing was packed. Media, spectators, people who'd been following the trial. Judge Williams looked at the defendants with an expression of clear disapproval. "Mr. Whitmore, you ran a criminal enterprise for over a decade. You stole from the government, from taxpayers, including people who work hard and pay their fair share. You committed bank fraud. You laundered money. You created a complex scheme to enrich yourself while breaking numerous laws. You also, and I find this particularly disturbing, deliberately humiliated your son-in-law, made him clean toilets despite his education, paid him poverty wages while you lived in luxury built on stolen money, called him an idiot to break his spirit. That cruelty speaks to your character. You're not just a financial criminal, you're someone who enjoys wielding power over others. She looked at the sentencing guidelines, the pre-sentence report, the recommendations. Richard Whitmore, you are sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. You are ordered to pay $15 million in restitution to the IRS. You are fined $20 million. All seized assets will be sold to satisfy restitution and fines. Richard was 65. 18 years meant he'd be 83 when released. If he survived that long, federal prison, even minimum security, was hard on elderly inmates. The judge turned to Claire. Ms. Whitmore Henderson, you participated in your father's crimes. You were educated, informed, and capable of understanding what you were doing. You signed fraudulent documents. You approved illegal transfers. You profited from these crimes. You also treated your husband with contempt, allowed your father to humiliate him, told him he was worthless. This speaks to your character as well. You are sentenced to 6 years in federal prison. You are ordered to pay $2 million in restitution. You are barred from serving as director or officer of any company for 10 years after release. Claire wailed. Actually wailed. Please, Your Honor, I have a life. I have a future. Please. You have a future in federal prison. You should have thought about consequences before you participated in crimes. Both were remanded immediately, led out of the courtroom in handcuffs. The Whitmore empire was over. All of Richard's properties were sold at auction over the following months. The mansion in Buckhead sold for $7.2 million. Claire's townhouse $1.8 million. The vacation homes, the cars, the artwork, the furniture, everything sold to pay restitution and fines. Whitmore Properties itself was dissolved. The legitimate properties were sold off to other real estate companies. The employees, including the executives who'd mocked Marcus, lost their jobs. The offshore accounts were seized and repatriated. The shell companies were dissolved. By the time everything was settled, Richard and Claire had lost everything. The entire $200 million empire was gone. Meanwhile, Marcus was rebuilding. A week after sentencing, he got a call from a company that had read about the trial. Mr. Henderson, we're a commercial real estate firm in Midtown. We need someone with your resilience. Someone who survived that level of humiliation and kept going. That takes character. We're offering you a position as director of operations. $120,000 base salary. Full benefits. Start immediately if you're interested. Marcus looked at me, tears in his eyes. They want to hire me. Real job, real salary. Because you're talented and capable, baby. Just like I always told you. He took the job, thrived at it. 6 months later, he was promoted to vice president. Salary increased to $180,000. He started dating again. Met a woman named Alicia at a work conference. She was kind, smart, treated him with respect and warmth. She asks about my day. Marcus told me. Actually listens when I talk. Tells me I'm smart. I forgot what that felt like. The divorce from Claire was finalized while she was in prison. She'd tried to contest it, but had no grounds and no money for lawyers. Marcus was free. 2 years after the trial, Marcus and I had dinner at my house. It had become our Sunday tradition. He'd come over sometimes with Alicia and we'd cook together and talk. Mom, I need to thank you, Marcus said as we cleared plates after dinner. For what? For saving me. I was broken. I actually believed I was worthless. That I deserved to clean toilets for $35,000 a year. That Claire and her father were right about me. Baby, you were never worthless. I know that now. But I didn't know it then. And if you hadn't investigated Richard, if you hadn't exposed what he was doing, I'd probably still be there. Still cleaning bathrooms. Still married to Claire. Still thinking I was an idiot. You would have figured it out eventually. Maybe. But you didn't wait for eventually. You went to war for me. You used 30 years of expertise to destroy a $200 million empire because someone hurt your son. I smiled. Damn right I did. You're my baby, nobody gets to treat you like that. Richard really didn't know who you were, did he? He thought I was just some retired government worker. Marcus's mother. Someone insignificant who he could dismiss. He had no idea that I'd spent 3 decades putting people like him in prison. That I knew every trick, Every scheme, every way criminals hide money, his arrogance was his downfall. That and the fact that he's a criminal who broke about 15 different laws. We laughed together. How are they doing? Marcus asked. Richard and Claire, in prison. Richard's in a federal facility in Pennsylvania. Health isn't good, diabetes, heart problems. He'll probably die in there. And Claire? Federal prison camp in West Virginia. She writes to you, doesn't she? Every month. Letters saying she's sorry. She didn't know. She was manipulated by her father. Do you believe her? No. She signed documents. She approved transfers. She knew exactly what she was doing. She's just sorry she got caught. Are you going to write back? No. That part of my life is over. I'm with Alicia now. She's good for me, Mom. She sees me as an equal, respects me, loves me. I'm so happy for you, baby. 3 years after the trial, I got a letter from Richard Whitmore, from prison. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. The handwriting was shaky. Health problems, probably. Mrs. Henderson, I'm writing to apologize for how I treated Marcus. I was cruel and wrong. I should never have humiliated him the way I did. I'm also writing to tell you that you ruined my life. Took everything from me, put me in prison where I'll die. Was it worth it? Destroying a man's entire legacy over hurt feelings? I hope you're satisfied, Richard Whitmore. I read it twice. Then I wrote back. Brief, direct. Mr. Whitmore, you didn't ruin your own life because I hurt your feelings. You ruined it because you committed crimes for over a decade. I didn't steal $42 million and hide it offshore. You did. I didn't falsify property valuations to commit bank fraud. You did. I didn't create shell companies to launder money. You did. I didn't evade $15 million in taxes. You did. I simply made sure you faced consequences for your crimes. As for Marcus, you didn't humiliate him over hurt feelings. You deliberately broke his spirit to maintain power over him. That's abuse, not business strategy. The fact that your victim's mother happened to be a federal agent who spent 30 years investigating financial crimes, that's not injustice, that's karma. You're in prison because you're a criminal. I just made sure you got caught. Am I satisfied? Yes. Justice was served. A criminal went to prison. My son is free and thriving. I hope you spend your remaining years thinking about how your arrogance and cruelty led to your downfall. Gloria Henderson. I never heard from him again. I'm Gloria Henderson. I'm 70 years old now. I stopped by to see my son on his first day at his father-in-law's company and found him cleaning bathrooms. His father-in-law said, "This idiot isn't good for anything else." My daughter-in-law just smirked. My son cried from embarrassment. I didn't say a word. I just walked out and made one call. One call to my former colleague at the Department of Justice, because Richard Whitmore didn't know who I was. Didn't know what I'd done for 30 years. I was Special Agent Gloria Henderson, IRS Criminal Investigation Division. I investigated financial crimes for 3 decades, put dozens of wealthy, powerful criminals in federal prison. I'd retired 10 years ago. But when someone hurt my son, I came out of retirement for one last case. I investigated Richard Whitmore like I'd investigated hundreds of criminals before him. Followed the money trails. Found the offshore accounts. Documented the fraud. I built an airtight case. 47 counts against Richard. 12 against Claire. Both convicted. Richard sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. Claire to 6 years. Their entire $200 million empire seized and sold. Every property, every account, every asset, gone. Richard will die in prison. Claire will be 40 when she's released. With no money, no empire, no future except what she can build from nothing. Meanwhile, my son Marcus is thriving. Vice president at a real estate firm, making $180,000 a year. Dating a wonderful woman who treats him with respect. Happy, confident, free. Richard thought he could humiliate my son without consequences. He was wrong, because I'm not just Marcus's mother. I'm a federal agent who spent 30 years learning exactly how to destroy people like Richard Whitmore. And I used every skill, every resource, every bit of expertise I had to take down his empire. That's not revenge. That's justice. That's motherhood. You don't hurt someone's child and expect no consequences, especially when that someone spent 3 decades putting criminals in federal prison. Marcus is free now, happy, successful, living the life he deserves. Richard is in prison where he'll die. Claire is in prison learning that actions have consequences. And I'm here, retired again, having Sunday dinners with my son and his girlfriend, watching him thrive. Some people would say I'm vindictive. that I destroyed lives out of spite. But I didn't destroy anything. I simply revealed the truth about criminals who've been breaking laws for over a decade. Richard destroyed himself through his crimes. I just made sure he got caught. And yes, I'm satisfied. Justice was served. My son is free, and I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. Because that's what mothers do. We protect our children, by any means necessary, even if it means bringing down a $200 million criminal empire. Richard Whitmore made one fatal mistake. He underestimated a black woman he thought was insignificant, and that mistake cost him everything. I'm Gloria Henderson. I'm a mother. I'm a retired federal agent, and I don't lose.